Welcome. My name is Marcel, and I'm here to talk about my second book in the Balar series. I'm going to read you a little segment, and so basically, both of the books contain several short stories that are interconnected in the same setting, in the town of Balar. It's set in the late 1800s, prime Dracula Frankenstein era. So let's get started. I'm going to be reading one of the shorter stories in the second volume, entitled Ears. So every now and again, I have a story that's got a fairy tale flavor. It starts once upon a time. So let's see. Ears. Once upon a time, there was a happy family in Balar. It was a strange and singular thing, for no family could be happy for long, especially not in a place like this. They were the Caldwells. Jimmy Caldwell, a logger by trade and reformed gambler by nature, took good care of his wife. She, Morgane Caldwell, had by all accounts married below her station, shunning the DuPont name and all that came with it, all except the wealthy house, a handsome three-story affair not far from where her late sister Monica and her family resided. Morgane and Jimmy were blessed with two children, serious Clara and curious Frederick. Well-behaved children by all accounts for those at 6 and 10. Morgane, who herself had been given the best schooling a girl could have been afforded, stayed home to tutor the two of them in numbers, letters, and geography, careful not to do too much reading herself. Jimmy, who was better with his hands than his mind, made a living upon the lumber yards, careful not to do too much of the dangerous work himself, especially careful to stay away from the dog-fighting pits. When the day was done and the children were abed, the couple would retire to their lavish bedchamber and spend the night in each other's arms. It was a happy life, supported by meager means, for you see, a logger's salary could only stretch so far. When times were lean, they would sell off their dusty possessions that Morgane's parents, dear Harriet and Lucas DuPont, left around the house. Morgane mended and adjusted clothes. Jimmy amended and adjusted their spending, forsaking frivolous extras as best he could. Smaller portions on their plates, fewer logs on their fire. Just enough to get by, just enough to make sure that no one, not the gossipy neighbors nor the concerned family, would know the full measure of their predicament. Each time they sold another knick-knack or art piece, they came closer to the brink. Despite their frugal precautions, money seemed to slip through their fingers. Yet they were happy still. A strained happiness is a happiness still. They decided to play it by ear. One day in late October, in the year 1895, a delivery came to the door of the DuPont Manor. A man in a cart laden with a fine Persian carpet freshly off the train. A carpet so large that the man strained to heave the roll from his cart, the mule pawing at the ground. Morgane, who was there to receive it, for her husband was off at work, assured the man that this must have been some mistake. She could not admit to him that she had not the funds to purchase such a luxury, for the neighbors were watching. "No mistake, madam," said the deliverer. "DuPont Manor, it says here. Is this such and such address, is it not?" She told him that it was, and that the name was Caldwell now, an easy mistake. By and by she tried to assure him that this was a mix-up, and that he ought to take it back to where it came from. To her dismay, the man seemed to guess at her reasoning. "Not to worry, ma'am," he said. "All paid up, the carpet, the transport, the delivery. All that is required is your name in ink. Very well then, she said. Take it to the attic. This way. Morgana and the children followed the man as he huffed and puffed his way through the house. Up one staircase, then another, then up a ladder in the library. The latter was a gleaming space crammed with tomes and volumes, a space Morgana stayed out of, her nervous feet never crossing the threshold. Remember, dear, your condition. She remained at the doorframe, telling the kids not to get in the man's way. He sweated and spluttered, but eventually he pushed the magnificent thing through the hatch and into the attic space. She thanked the man, offering him tea and cakes, though they had neither. The man politely declined, decrying a plethora of other deliveries and an abject lack of time. Can we have a look? Asked serious little Clara, her arms folded and her brow furrowed. Please, said Frederick, his curiosity as ever getting the better of him. Morgana could not say no to his eyes. Very well, she said, but carefully. You know how heights scare me. They don't scare me, mother, said Frederick. Morgana instructed Clara to hold the ladder while her brother climbed. She, Morgana, never moved from her spot at the door. She knew that one step into the library would mean a loss of control. Her fingers would find a book, her eyes would race across the words, and her mind would be set adrift upon a sea of madness. Madness runs in the family, dear. You don't want to end up like your father, do you? Best leave the books, like the doctors say. What will the children think if you see what's not there? Careful, Frederick, she said to her eldest. She longed for the days when he was small and skittish. Oh, how like his father he is becoming, how ever heedless of the consequences. I'm almost there, mother, to the little boy. He reached the top, opened the hatch, and clambered slightly onwards. What do you see, child? Asked Morgana, for she could not see into the dark space from where she stood. Do be careful. It's beautiful, mother, said Frederick. Patterns in all shapes and all the colors. I want to see, called Clara from the bottom of the ladder. Shapes are so beautiful, mother, said Frederick. They look like ears. Morgana smiled at this. What a wonderful imagination her son had. Perhaps it's listening, she called. Both of you better be on your best behavior. Now come down with care, Frederick. The boy did as he was told. The girl huffed, disappointed that she could not see. Your father will find someone to buy it, said Morgana as her children joined her at the door. Such things are worth a fortune. Come, let us return to the lessons. She gave the library one final longing look as she ushered the children downstairs. The delivery man and his cart and his mule rushed back to the station, for there was a plethora of other deliveries and an abject lack of time, and every step counted. The carpet had been heavy, and the mix-up with the addresses had skewed his schedule. How was he to know that they were 2 DuPont houses? Every step counted, and he tried to take them 2 at a time. So blinded by haste was he that he did not see the carriage bearing down upon him. There was a great crash, punctuated by the whinnies of broken horses and the cries of injured men. The rest of his deliveries would be indefinitely late. Jimmy Caldwell came home that night, smelling of sawdust and stinking of dog. You're late, said his wife with a tap of her foot at the bottom of the stair. He grunted a reason and mumbled an excuse. Morgana would forgive him, of course. She always did. She kissed him upon his cheek and told him that the children were abed. Her gentle hand led him upstairs. We have something to sell, she told her husband. A fine carpet of many colors and strange designs. I will tell you where it is so that you may see it for yourself at first light. How can we afford such a thing? He asked, matching her stare for stare. We don't have to, she told him. Perhaps we inherited it. I don't know. Let us not ponder this lucky happenstance. She smiled at him, and he smiled at her. We'll find a good price for it, my love, he said. We may make do with more than just bread this week. And so, arm in arm, they retired their bedchamber, excited by all the future held. Little did they know, in the dark crawl space above the library, something stirred. In the darkness, the carpet unrolled itself. In the darkness, something went wet and slick, began to drip. The next day, Jimmy's friends told him of a man in search of fine things, a man of means no less, who was indeed in search of a fine carpet. Did it come off the train? Asked this man, removing a fine top hat. He smiled a smile of 1,000 good fortunes, his teeth as white as snow. Jimmy found himself at a loss for words, for he had never in his life beheld such a fine young fellow. His honest eyes lingered on the trinket on the man's lapel, a fine feather made from the finest Balar silver. By way of shaking his head, he communicated to the man that he did not know where it came from. "It is fine, sir," he said, crumpling his hat in his hands. "Mighty fine indeed. It's the best I've ever seen, sir, clean and new. Not a spot on it, despite coming from far away." "And where does it come from?" asked a young man in a voice like winter. Jimmy stared, dumbstruck, for a moment. He had heard the man's question. It was just that there was something about his eyes, his deep, dark eyes. There was something shining in them. Was it the shine of dice, the grandeur of a hand of aces, or was it a betting stub, defying long odds? "I don't know, sir," said Jimmy, staring dumbly. "My wife, she says it's from far beyond these mountains here, a place I can hardly imagine, sir." The young man seemed pleased by this. He produced a leather pouch from inside his black jacket. Jimmy did not need to open it to know that it was stuffed with coins. The man told him a sum Jimmy had not known in a long time, not since the early days of him and Morgane. "Good," said the man. "Then we are agreed. I will send someone to pick it up in the morrow." He held out the bag. Jimmy took it, but the man did not let go. "Are you a betting man?" asked the stranger, his words pure and clipped. Jimmy gulped. "No, sir," he said. "That is to say, I was, sir. Or, more to the truth, sir, I am, but I try not to be." The man let go of the bag and smiled at Jimmy. "I have a tip," he said. "They have a new fighter down in the pit. Fierce creature. A breed like no other. Typhon is his name. A sure thing." "That may be so, sir," said Jimmy, feeling the hefty weight of the bag. "But I will not lie to my wife again." The stranger just smiled at him. "Thank you for your business, sir." And so Jimmy was on his way, the heavy bag burning a hole in his pocket. Back at home, the children were in bed. They were not, however, ready for sleep just yet. "One story," cried Clara. "Please," said Frederick, joining in. Morgane sighed and relented. She said that she would wake one up right off the top of her head. Anything they wanted. She had done this before to various levels of success. On this occasion, however, her suggestion was met with a derisive groan. "A real story," said Clara. "One from a book, like you used to." Morgane spilled over with reasons and excuses, but the children would not relent. Just one story. What would be the harm? "All right, children," she said. "Just one story. Stay in bed while I go to the library." Morgane's eager feet slapped along the floor and up the stairs, candle flickering. She paused at the library door, her heart pounding excitedly. The door creaked invitingly as she pushed it open. Candlelight revealed ranks and ranks of leather-bound threads. She crept in, her chest light with joy, her fingers trailing along the books. Oh, how well she knew them in her youth. She and her sister Monica would read and read, uncovering dark secrets and thrilling adventures. She knew this current shelf well. It was dedicated to the works of ancient philosophers, scientists, and medicine men of yesteryear. Their old words translated into new languages. Massive volumes that Morgane, in her foolish youth, that is, never attempted to tackle. As such, she was surprised to find several of these leather-bound behemoths half slid out of their spaces. She carefully slid them out, one by one, opening the crackling covers to peer at the titles before sliding them back into their rightful places. Paracelsian Principles, Astronomia Magna, and Splendor Solis, none of which meant anything to her. Better not read too much. Madness runs in the family, dear. She walked on, her bare feet suddenly gripped by cold. She could not lose herself here, she knew. Just one story, just one real story. That's all that she was here for. She moved on. Her feet were not cold, she realized. They were wet, sticking to the floor with each step. She glanced down, and in the flickering candlelight, she beheld a floor covered in drying blood, red splashes along her legs. Not real, not real, not real, she said to herself. Something thudded overhead, the trapdoor in the attic space closing. She glanced up, nothing there, nothing but a growing dark stain on the white ceiling. Something dripped from the growing spot and landed on her cheek. She blinked, wiped it away, her fingers coming away. Red. Blood. She nearly dropped the candle as she ran from the room. In such haste was she that she nearly ran into young Frederick on the stairs. "Are you all right, mother?" asked the little boy, rubbing his tired eyes. "Yes," she said. "Where's your sister?" "Asleep," he said. Asleep, he said. "You were gone a long time, mother. I came to see if you got lost." "How long?" she asked. He pointed at her face. "Are you hurt?" She ran her fingers across her face. More blood. "It's not mine," she said, slightly dazed. She looked at her son, his eyes sparkling with the candle flame. "You can see it?" "Of course," she said. He gave her a quizzical look. "Are you all right, mother?" She took him by the hand and slowly led him up the stairs. She pushed the door of the library open, holding out the candle. "That," she said. "That," she said, pointing at the slick floor. "Can you see it?" There was another thud from the trap door, as if something had been peeking out and then let it fall. Both of them jumped in fright. "Go, go," she said, frantically herding him along, making him go back down the stairs. It was the panic in her voice that disturbed him. "What is it, mother? What is it?" he said, his voice squeaking. They heard another thud from the library. Their blood ran cold when they heard something on the ladder, climbing rung after rung. "Quick," she squealed, "to your sister's room." "Where is your father?" Where was Jimmy, indeed? Down in a secret place in Balar, below a forgotten house in a basement long abandoned, men were cheering. Dogs barked and growled and yelled. The central space was caged off and spotted with blood and fur. Men leaned against the mesh, shouting and sneering at the fighting dogs within. In a corner of the room stood a counter where poor souls gave away the last they had. Coins were counted, marks were made, dirty hands scraped, meager winnings of the wood, or more likely, counted them out in bitter defeat. Here was Jimmy Caldwell, facing down a bookmaker. 100 on the one fighting Typhon, he said, counting out the coin. Other men shot him suspicious looks. The bookmaker turned one of the coins over between his fingers. He thought it strange, but these were surely the dirty coins he parted with this morning when a stranger sold him a fighting dog. And what a monstrous thing it was, the very one named Typhon, no less. "You are betting against it?" he asked Jimmy. Jimmy nodded. "I know a lie when I hear one," he said. "A sure winner is sure to be a sure loser every time." The bookmaker nodded. for he knew the shallowness of Jimmy's luck. Well, if you're sure, this new beast is quite a thing, to be sure. Sure, said Jimmy, and he went to join his friends at the side of the pit. The winner of the current fight was led away, frothing mouth pink with blood. The loser was collected, little more than a broken lump of fur. Someone cheered, someone swore. Drinks spilled. Back again, Jimmy, said one of his friends. Haven't you lost all your wife's money yet, have you? Jimmy ignored him. He would prove them all wrong, he thought. He kept his eye on the arena, watching as they let his choice in, a muscular mastiff, foaming at the mouth. Looks strong, said Jimmy, his voice lost in the raucous atmosphere. He'll win for certain. And then they heard it. They all heard it. The shouting, the laughter, the clinking tankards, it all stopped, replaced by a terrible silence. They felt it coming. This fighter named Typhon. They felt the ground shake beneath their feet. The shadow emerged, more a bear than a dog. It stomped into the arena, filling half of the space. Mottled black fur, claws like honed daggers. Its eyes rolled wildly in its long muzzled head. That's not a dog, said Jimmy. Jimmy Caldwell came home that night, smelling of sawdust and stinking of blood. His pockets were light, but his heart was heavy. She would not believe that it was time, he knew. His dear Morgane. How the trust would die in her eyes, eyes he could never look into again, not without feeling this guilt. He stumbled up the steps of his fine home, bile burning at the back of his throat. Tomorrow a man, the finest man he ever saw, would come to collect the carpet with the colors and the many patterns, patterns like ears. He had climbed the ladder that morning to see it for himself. He had opened the hatch and beheld the roll and its fine weave. He had unrolled it a touch, just to see, just to know. What he saw was not many colors, but one. Slick red blood, as fresh as a new kill. What he saw were not many patterns, but bits of flesh and bone. He did not tell his wife. He did not tell anyone, for surely they would know a lie when they heard one. He climbed back down the ladder, shaking his head. Perhaps he had imagined. Better that than admitting to the madness, for it ran in his wife's family, not his. He stood before the door, sighing and thinking. What would he say? How would he say it? The door opened before he could form an answer. It had never opened by itself before. His wife stood in the doorway, beaming with a smile. She had never opened the door for him before. He looked at her for a moment, waiting for her arms to fold and her foot to tap. Instead, she stepped forward and kissed him on the ear. Come with me, my love, she said. I have something you must see. She took him by the hand and led him in. Somewhere in the house, faintly behind a door, were the voices of his children shouting, Run, father, run. Okay, so that's a smaller story. They're all connected, as I said. So, happy Halloween.